For the past 2 weeks, there have been some major updates to the files. It's actually starting to get crazy. People were telling me that I have to make a video on this, and while I typically stray away from recent events, something just told me that I should look into this. Now I realize why. This may be the biggest video I've ever made. I just spent the last week developing a research tool that would allow me to search with my own terms through 44,000 of those documents. But I took a completely different approach. I wasn't looking for names or occult terms. I was looking for what he was building. And what I found changes the entire story. Tucker Carlson had Ian Carroll on his show this week to go through the Epstein files. 2 hours. They covered the trafficking, they covered the intelligence connections, they covered the financial web, and then Tucker said something that stopped me.
I suspect that the DOJ was not very interested in making them very accessible, as noted by them not giving us zip downloads to even download them with this time. So, trying to make them more accessible for myself.
Can I suggest a thread, for a younger, more energetic man to follow up on?
Absolutely.
And that's Epstein's fixation on genetics and biotechnology.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's very clear to me, well, much is not clear to me at all, and I don't understand this category very well. I'm not a scientist, a geneticist, but I have noticed, not just with Epstein, but with a bunch of people in Epstein's orbit, there is a fixation on genetics and changing genetics and improving people and cloning and on really kind of tampering with the material of life in a way that someone who believed he was God would, or someone who's involved in the supernatural would. I mean, there's really heavy stuff here, and that really, really matters. And I have not seen anybody go into that in a methodical way.
He's right. Nobody has. Until now. Here's a story everyone has. Epstein told scientists he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. He had a ranch in New Mexico where the plan was to impregnate 20 women at a time. George Church, Harvard's top CRISPR gene editing pioneer, had regular documented meetings with him. A victim wrote in her own words, quote, "I'm not your personal incubator." In 30 23andMe DNA kits were shipped to Dubai for a Middle Eastern royal. And that's where every outlet stopped. The victim diary got picked up by the tabloids, the 23andMe kits got a couple paragraphs in SFGate, and then everyone moved on to the next celebrity name. Everyone is asking who was in Epstein's circle, but nobody's asking what he was building. When you read these documents, the actual EFTA files, not the headlines, a pattern emerges. Shell companies declaring DNA analysis as their business activity. $50,000 wired to an artificial intelligence institute. A male fertility specialist getting haircuts at the residence. Then there are these meetings called designer babies, 6 days before meetings with the egg people. A woman flown from Manchester, England, and referred to a fertility clinic. This seems to be an operation. Infrastructure, funding, scientists, and victims who knew. So let's just go through the documents. This is a Deutsche Bank Know Your Customer form for a company called Southern Trust Company Incorporated, registered in the U.S. Virgin Islands, sole owner and president, Jeffrey E. Epstein. DNA analysis. That's what Epstein told his bank that his company does. Expected quarterly revenue, $12.5 million. Annual income, $10 million. So, I went looking for what Southern Trust actually did. Nothing. No lab, no research, no scientist on payroll. The actual operations were pure investment management. Venezuelan government bonds, derivatives, Epstein's personal salary. The company was originally called Financial Informatics Incorporated. DNA analysis was a fiction, a qualifying business activity for USVI tax incentives. Now follow the money. The Cook Foundation, that's one of Epstein's nonprofits, wires $50,000 to the Singularity Institute for Artificial Intelligence. That's now called MIRI, the organization dedicated to building artificial general intelligence. EFTA 01500847. Nobody has ever reported this wire. $20,000 to the Worldwide Transhumanist Association. $100,000 to Ben Goertzel, one of the leading AGI researchers on the planet. A $200,000 invoice for Joseph Thackeray, a researcher George Church introduced to Epstein who was editing his own stem cells with CRISPR. $6.5 million to Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. Genetics, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, life extension, CRISPR gene editing. He funded all of it. And that's just the science side. So I kept digging. A master transaction ledger. 21 transactions from 2013 through 2018. Leon Black, the head of Apollo Management, one of the largest private equity funds on Earth, sends over $120 million through Epstein's Southern Trust Company. That money routes to Edmond de Rothschild Bank in Geneva. $10 million goes directly to Benjamin Edmond de Rothschild personally, and in the same ledger, Southern Trust is investing in Peter Thiel's Valor Venture funds. Epstein was the financial intermediary routing $167 million between one of Wall Street's largest PE funds, a European private bank, and Silicon Valley's most connected venture capitalist. And his cover story for all of it? DNA analysis. Then there's this. A complete investor pitch deck from a San Francisco biotech venture capital fund called Descartes Capital, found in Epstein's seized files. The fund explicitly targets Russian oligarch money. Their portfolio is gene therapy using engineered viruses, transgenic chicken bioreactors, meaning they insert human genes into animal germ cells, cancer immunotherapy. A Princeton molecular biology professor is on the advisory board. Descartes Capital returns 0 results connected to Epstein anywhere. No news article, no Reddit thread, nothing on YouTube. And then there's biolab LLC. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. But essentially, Christina Galbraith previously worked for Epstein's foundation. By January 2019, she'd become the director of genetic therapies at a company called biolab. It might be pronounced biolab, but again, I'm not sure. She published on genetic vectors, and she asked to keep using the foundation's Lexington Avenue office space. Biolab LLC returns 0 results on the open web. A genetics company that doesn't exist publicly, run by an Epstein Foundation employee working on genetic vectors out of his office? EFTA 02278036. Now this one should make you stop. In Epstein's files, there are investment research documents about Editas Medicine, a CRISPR gene editing company. Standard financial analysis. But look at what's in it. These are the only documents in 44,000 files that contain the word germline. That means editing DNA that gets passed down to future generations. Heritable genetic modification. Gene editing research about permanently modifying human embryos sitting in the seized evidence of a convicted sex trafficker. Ask yourself why that was in his files. One more. A file called traitsandappearance.xls. An Excel spreadsheet about human traits and physical appearance created by Curtis Marine, a researcher at Arizona State University's Institute of Human Origins, for a workshop called Human Uniqueness and Behavior Modernity. It was forwarded through the physicist Lawrence Krauss to Epstein. Then, Epstein forwarded it to Jess Staley, head of JP Morgan's investment bank. And he added a line, "Your daughter is also invited too." Okay, hold up. A spreadsheet cataloging human traits and appearance forwarded it to one of Wall Street's most powerful bankers with an invitation that included his daughter. Let's continue. If you're going to run a genetics program, you need access to a genetics lab. Epstein didn't just fund Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. He had his own key card. September 2017, Mei Huang, a PhD staff member, emails Epstein's assistant. The card reader system at Martin Novak's Institute had been changed. She needed an address to mail Jeffrey a new access card. So they mailed it to his home, 9 East 71st Street, New York. When the system changed again, instructions were sent for how to get to the 6th floor. That means Epstein had permanent, unsupervised building access to Harvard's Genetics Research Institute. And when the locks changed, staff sent him new keys. And he used that access. In the files, I found complete schedules for day-long private meetings at Harvard, back-to-back, all in one building, with some very important people. May 6th, 2018, 10:15 a.m., Martin Novak, the head of the program for evolutionary dynamics, 11:30 to 3, Joy Ito and a group from MIT including Caleb Harper from Open Agriculture, 3 p.m., Yo Shabak, the AI and consciousness researcher, 4 p.m., Leonid Peshkin. Okay, so this Peshkin guy, Harvard researcher in developmental biology and single-cell genomics, embryonic development, Epstein asked for him by name. Nobody has ever reported on Leonid Peshkin's involvement. And then dinner at 6 with Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary of the United States, at Martin Novak's Institute. Why? 5 months later, October 15th, same pattern. Novak at 11:30, then at 12:30, Kamila Naxarova, Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, cancer genetics, studies tumor evolution at the single-cell level. Nobody has reported on her either. 2 p.m., John de la Parra from MIT Open Agriculture. 3:30, Yo Shabak again. 5:30, snacks with Larry Summers. 7 p.m., dinner with Joy Ito. The same people, genetics, AI, consciousness, former Treasury Secretary, one building, one day, organized by a convicted sex offender with his own key card. If you're running a reproductive operation, you need a doctor. Meet Harry Fish. Harry Fish is one of America's leading urologists. His specialty is male reproductive health, sperm quality, fertility optimization, testosterone. He has 606 appearances in the Epstein documents, $2,800 in urology invoices, home visits at Epstein's residence on the same day the calendar reads 10 Harry Fish, 11:30 Leon, 2:30 Deepak, 3:30 Woody. That's Leon Black, Deepak Chopra, Woody Allen. But Fish wasn't just his doctor. It would seem he was inner circle. They had lunch at the 2nd Avenue Deli where Fish sent him a Wall Street Journal article about female Viagra. Fish got haircuts from Epstein's personal barber at the residence. He attended a Woody Allen movie screening alongside Karina Shiliak. And for Christmas, Epstein sent him an Apple Watch. And then a reminder call in May 2019, 6 weeks before Epstein's arrest. So it would seem he was inner circle, and Fish, his specialty, is the exact thing you would need for a reproductive operation. And Fish wasn't the only one. In September 2018, Epstein saw a second urologist, Darius Paduch, Cornell Medical. And Monday the 24th, he sees Fish. Wednesday the 26th, he sees Paduch. Paduch's staff asked for the reason for the visit, but Epstein's office never answered. There's a note in the files that says, "Ask Dr. Fish." That's a cross-referral between the two urologists, with Epstein's office controlling the information. A few days later, Epstein's staff is frantically chasing blood test results. October 2nd through 4th, 3 days of calls trying to get results from Paduch's office. Keep in mind that Darius Paduch has since been convicted of sexually abusing his patients, including minors. Nobody has ever connected these two stories. Epstein's reproductive medicine specialist and his convicted abuser urologist seeing the same patient in the same week, cross-referring through Epstein's office. August 2018. Watch how fast this moves. August 2nd. A meeting called Designer Babies. Brian Bishop, biohacker, CRISPR advocate. The meeting uses a pre-existing video room. The URL is Tax Master Genetics. That name already existed. That means these discussions had been happening. 3 days later, August 5th, Bishop puts the pitch in writing. The subject line is Designer Babies. and his goal, in his own words, the first live birth of a human designer baby, and possibly a human clone within 5 years. The budget was $1.7 million a year for up to 5 years, plus $1 million for a lab setup. The plan was transgenic mice first, then human volunteers. And the intended outcome? The first human with transgenic sperm, and we begin taking pre-orders. Pre-orders for genetically modified humans. Epstein's response? I have no issues with investing. The problem is only if I am seen to lead. So he wanted in, he just didn't want his name on it. And Bishop knew that. In the same thread he writes, anonymity requirements about babies. We can't publicly identify whose these are or their parents or benefactors. It would brand the child as, essentially, and sadly, a freak for life in the media. He then offers to run the whole thing under his own project so Epstein has, his words, a sufficient level of deniability. There it is. By August 13th, Bishop sent a follow-up. He was already running experiments. Quote, proceeding with more mouse testing at my Ukraine lab. Surgeries, microinjection. The lab was at the Institute of Gerontology at Ukraine's Academy of Medical Sciences in Kiev. A real lab with real experiments. Real animals being cut open and injected with modified genetic material. This is starting to look like a cloning program and a billionaire funder who wanted to stay invisible. August 8th. David Mitchell, Epstein's fixer, sends an email. Jeffrey wanted to set up a meeting with the egg people. And the staff replies, ha, egg people. August 9th, 7:30 a.m. The egg people meeting happens at 9 East 71st Street. By 11, Brad Karp is there, one of the top litigation lawyers in the country. By 1:15, lunch with Leon Black. August 20th, a woman is flown from Manchester, England to New York. September 9th, Epstein personally directs his staff. Find her a gynecologist in Manchester. September 2018, staff recommends Manchester Fertility Clinic. Okay, so 6 days between a designer babies meeting and an egg people meeting, 11 days later, a woman flown internationally and referred to a fertility clinic. Nobody has reported on the egg people term, not even a single news article. Now we go international. So CNBC just ran a piece on Epstein's Silicon Valley connections. They confirmed Anne Wojcicki, the founder of 23andMe, was connected to Epstein. A victim alleged that she met Wojcicki on Epstein's island. CNBC reported that and moved on, but they didn't mention this. That's Epstein's own email, misspellings and all. Rashid Epstein. A fake identity created to register a DNA kit for Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai. His assistant, Leslie Groff, follows up. We can register a kit for you as Rashid Epstein. The kits go to JFK Terminal 4, Door 5, onto Emirates Flight 202 to Dubai. When 23andMe invalidates them for geographic restrictions, Sultan proposes a workaround. Collect the DNA in Dubai, mail the samples to New York. This seems to be a covert DNA collection operation using a fraudulent identity run through household staff for Middle Eastern royalty? And here's what ties it all together. March 2014, John Brockman, who runs the Edge Foundation, sends out invitations for a dinner in Vancouver. The guest list: Jeff Bezos, Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Larry Page, and the two names that matter for this story, Jeffrey Epstein and Anne Wojcicki. Anne Wojcicki, the founder of 23andMe, the same company whose DNA kits Epstein registered under a fake name and shipped to Dubai royalty. CNBC had access to the same documents I did. They confirmed Wojcicki was connected to Epstein, and they left all of this on the table. Read the article. Every name gets the same treatment. Thiel, legal and legitimate purposes. Hoffman, philanthropic purposes. Gates, Absolutely absurd and completely false. Bryn, no comment. The article mentions zero genetics, zero DNA, zero reproductive programs, zero CRISPR. The words baby, fertility, and gene don't appear once. That's not journalism. That's damage control for Silicon Valley. They wrote the version of the story that protects the people in it. Now, Bill Gates. 3 days ago, the Wall Street Journal published an article called How Epstein Inserted Himself in a Split Between Bill Gates and a Top Gates Advisor. They reported that in 2013, Epstein jumped into negotiations between Gates and his science advisor, Boris Nikolic. That Epstein wrote fake resignation letters to himself as leverage, that he dangled allegations about Gates' extramarital affairs, and that Gates himself said, quote, Jeffrey was quite helpful. Without him, it would have been harder, end quote. So what is the Wall Street Journal's angle here? While sure, they are going deep by revealing this, but it seems like their angle is Epstein was a manipulator who exploited a business split. And that's true, but that's where they stopped. They never asked the obvious question. Why would a convicted sex trafficker care about a biotech fund separation? Everyone knows Gates and Epstein met, but nobody really knows why. Look at this document. A draft separation agreement between Boris Nikolic and Bill Gates. Nikolic was Gates' science advisor, one of his closest. The agreement says they won't disparage each other, they'll keep it confidential, employment ends January 1st, 2014. But this document was sent to Jeffrey Epstein for input. A confidential employment separation between Bill Gates and his science advisor? And Epstein was the one being consulted? Why? Nikolic emailed Epstein directly about the terms. In addition to changing date to the end of January, the last point needed total change, re-helping me find a job. He was negotiating his exit from Bill Gates through Jeffrey Epstein. Boris Nikolic was later named in Epstein's will as alternate executor. 124 documents connect them in the corpus. Epstein wasn't just socially connected to Gates. He was brokering confidential employment separations for Gates' closest science advisors. Nikolic is the bridge figure. Everything I've shown you so far is infrastructure. Shell companies, wire transfers, meeting calendars, key cards, documents. But the files contain something else. This is a letter written by a victim, addressed directly to Jeffrey Epstein. This is scary. Let me show you what this document is. Your body has never been given time to properly heal. Where is my baby? Where is Jelaine? I am not your personal incubator. She knew she was being used for reproduction and she said it directly. But that's actually just the surface. This is about to blow your mind. So I'm sure you've been seeing the incubator stuff in the news recently. It's been covered, but they're not really explaining it. This is what they didn't tell you. This victim didn't write that letter in English. She wrote it in rail fence cipher. A rail fence cipher is a transposition code. You split your message across 2 rows, alternating letters. Top, bottom, top, bottom. To read it, you weave the rows back together. The actual page in the EFTA is not the journal. It's rows of letters that look like occult nonsense. But what I just read you, I'm not your personal incubator, where is the baby, where is Jelaine? That's what you get once you decode it. It would seem that the DOJ apparently had cryptanalysts decode it, and then they added this plain text translation to the file. But they don't clarify at all that it was a cipher. They just published the decoded letter like she wrote it normally. And they left out that the cipher ends with death. See, you're missing the context. The real question is, why does a trafficking victim know how to write in cipher? Why would she need to? A rail-fence cipher isn't something you just pick up. Someone most likely taught her this. That's a red flag. A victim writing in code implies training and operation. This reads like ritual abuse more than anything else. All the ciphers were decoded. One of them mentions the blood from supposedly Leon Black. We've mentioned him several times. The other cipher is her guilt. She feels like a monster. She remembers the screams. But I was looking through the PDF and I found this page. It's like a bunch of stickers or cutouts, and there's one that says protect the vanishing. And this victim wrote children. The vanishing children? What is she talking about? What's crazy is there's a whole nother PDF, and that too has a bunch of ciphers. Now let me show you really quick, because I can't explain it all, but you just need to see it. I'm sure most of you remember when this all came out, but here's the thing. We had zero context. Think about what I'm telling you right now, and how this all connects. Look at these ciphers. Look at her cutouts. This is no normal victim. She describes a forced medical procedure. Quote, close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak, she doesn't talk. A shot in rod-like instruments with a hook, consistent with a D and C procedure. Apparently the doctor was from Israel. Ghislaine Maxwell was present and directing. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey. Maxwell was making reproductive decisions Epstein didn't even know about. This victim was impregnated, carried to term, and her baby was born alive. She even names Jean-Luc Brunel directly. Quote, Jean-Luc Brunel is a disgusting pig. She says she was sent back after 6 weeks. Quote, punishment for trying to run. Right there, that's the reason for the ciphers. And here's the line that ties everything together. The superior gene pool? Why me? Why my hair color and eye color? That feels very Nazi-like. She says the piano and music comments we made to convince her this is right and will create perfect offspring. At first I thought that sounded like hypnotism, but it seems like they were trying to teach her to play the instrument. Quote, I miss the person I was before I was made into what feels as a human incubator. Okay, so this is a metaphor. She seems to be describing a eugenics program, and we've been tracing this through the documents. George Church, egg people, CRISPR, designer babies. And here's a girl saying they selected her for her hair color and eye color to create perfect offspring? She called it Nazi-like. And like I said, look at these stickers or cutouts and how the ciphers are under them. She's spelling it out for you. And look at this. Help me, please. Can't anyone find me? That's what the documents show. But let me tell you what I think it means. I saved this one for last because it connects everything. December 2nd, 2018. A Harvard lunch at Martin Novak's Institute. The guest, George Church, Harvard's top CRISPR pioneer. Seth Lloyd, MIT quantum computing, Martin Novak, and a woman. She had just flown in from Paris. She needed a US cell phone, and she was an American. Now look at this email. Epstein directing his staff on travel routes. Same as last time. Kiev to Paris, Moscow to Paris, St. Petersburg to Paris, Odessa to Paris, all converging on his apartment at 22 Avenue, Foch in Paris. It would seem that apartment was the hub for the Eastern European trafficking pipeline. Women from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, routed through Paris. Same as last time means this was a reoccurring operation with established routes. So why was a woman from that pipeline at a Harvard genetics lunch with the world's leading CRISPR researcher? Everything that I've shown you so far has been the documents. I haven't made a single claim. I haven't accused anyone of anything. What follows is what I think this means. You can disagree, you can turn off the video, but if you made it this far, I think you need to hear this. When you lay out all these documents, 3 layers emerge. Layer 1, the personal predation. This is the story everyone already knows. The massages, the girls, the island. Epstein was a predator. That's the version that went to trial, and that's where most people stopped. Layer 2, blackmail. Cameras in every room, every bedroom, every bathroom, every property. When you have the most powerful people on earth walking through your doors, and you have footage of what they do behind the closed ones, you don't need money. You have leverage. That's the intelligence operation. Layer 3, the genetics pipeline. And this is what no one is talking about. It would seem that the trafficking wasn't just predation, it was a supply chain. The victims weren't just being exploited, they're being harvested, eggs extracted, menstrual cycles tracked, fertility clinics arranged, babies taken. And a victim literally wrote, "I'm not your personal incubator." She's describing her function in the operation. But there's one thing that everyone is missing. Why Silicon Valley? Everyone keeps asking why Epstein was connected to tech billionaires. The answer isn't that they were donors. But what if their companies are the infrastructure? 23andMe, genetic profiles on millions of people. That's the training data. Palantir, pattern recognition across massive datasets. That's the trait selection engine. Microsoft, cloud computing and AI processing power. That's the computational backbone for processing genomic data. George Church in CRISPR. That's the editing tool. Once the AI identifies what to change, Church's lab can change it. Oil money can write checks. Only Silicon Valley owns AI, big data, and genetic databases. They're not funding the operation, they are the operation. Now keep in mind, this is all theoretical. I am interpreting public documents, but the infrastructure is real, the companies are real, and the connections between them are in the files. And if this theory is correct, it doesn't stop at production. These aren't just designer babies, it monitors the human. Palantir isn't just analyzing genetic data on the front end. It's a surveillance infrastructure that tracks populations on the back end. What am I saying? It would seem that these sickos are trying to design an engineered human race that's powered and monitored by AI. Design them, produce them, monitor them, control them, all in AI. That's why I called this video AI Baby Farms. It's not just baby farms. If you follow the documents to their logical conclusion, what you're looking at isn't just a trafficking operation. It's the blueprint for an AI-monitored, engineered population. Allegedly. And remember what I told you at the beginning of the video. Epstein told scientists he wanted to see the human race with his DNA. He wanted to impregnate 20 women at a time at his ranch in New Mexico. Everyone reported that like it was just fantasy, like it was some delusion of a narcissist. But look at what I just showed you. The shell companies, the fertility doctors, the egg harvesting, the CRISPR research, the AI funding. It seems like he was describing this operation. That is the full picture as I understand it, but that's just from 44,000 documents. Every EFTA number has been on your screen, so you can verify everything I've shown you. Now, the story doesn't end here. The documents speak for themselves, but if you want to understand why I called this video what I called it, stay here for 5 more minutes, because none of this is new. This has been happening for almost 300 years. In 1739, the Foundling Hospital opened in London, and it was funded by royalty, supported by aristocrats. And if you look at the coat of arms, there's the Diana of Ephesus, the multi-breasted ancient fertility goddess. But if you look closely, those aren't breasts, they're eggs. Right there on the official seal of a children's hospital. Why do you have occult symbolism on something that's supposed to be a charity? And what about in America? Well, there's a fraternal order that many have never heard of. They're called the Oddfellows. Similar to Freemasons, but with a completely different purpose. Funded by royalty, their symbols include the all-seeing eye, the fasces, skull and bones, and they were the ones that ran the orphanages in America in the 19th century. They ran the asylums. Their founder, Thomas Wildey, was himself an orphan. Orphans grooming the next generation of orphans. And they did all of this under the name of philanthropy. Now, if you follow the channel, you already know what I'm about to show you. But for those who don't, there are thousands of postcards from the 1890s to the 1910s that nobody talks about. They show babies being grown in cabbage patches, babies being harvested from gardens, babies arriving on trains, babies being pulled from water with hooks and nets, and some that literally say in French, "Nous sommes à vendre," we are for sale. These aren't art projects, these aren't cute jokes. There are thousands of these across Europe and America, and they depict a production line, a repopulation operation. The woman in the red is their handler. The men in the top hats pay for them. Familiar, right? This is the real history behind the Cabbage Patch Kids, and it's even in their lore. A story about babies being grown in a garden, delivered by a stork in uniform, while an evil witch tries to enslave them for labor. Nobody really ever questioned where that story came from. In 1881, a French doctor attached to a foundling hospital built the first baby incubator. He modeled it on a chicken hatchery. Within a decade, baby incubators filled with live premature infants were exhibited at world's fairs across Europe and America. The medical journal that covered it wrote, quote, "It is just as essential in raising men and women as it is raising any kind of stock," end quote. And in 1896, at the same Paris World Fair that showcased those incubators, the first narrative film ever made premiered, Le Fée aux Choux, The Fairy of the Cabbages, a woman pulling babies from a cabbage patch and handing them to couples who pay a farmer. The first movie ever made was about selling babies, and it was created to promote the incubators. Then came the trains. Between 1854 and 1929, over 200,000 children were loaded onto orphan trains and shipped from East Coast cities to the Midwest and West. 72% of them had at least one living parent. They weren't orphans, they were taken. Their names were changed, their records destroyed. They were displayed at train stations and then chosen by families. And then we're just told to forget everything about where they come from. So to put that together, foundling hospitals funded by elite with fertility goddesses on their seals, a secret fraternity running the orphanages, thousands of postcards advertising babies for sale, incubators modeled on chicken hatcheries at world fairs, the first movie ever made is about producing and selling babies, and 200,000 children were shipped across the continent with their identities erased. Now look at what I just showed you in these documents. Shell companies declaring DNA analysis, CRISPR gene editing, fertility doctors, egg harvesting, AI processing, forced pregnancies, babies taken, women trafficked through international pipelines and brought to genetics meetings, and $167 million routed through one man's shell company to a Rothschild bank. The same banking dynasty that's been at the center of European finance since the foundling hospitals were built. The same operation, different century. The only thing that changed is the technology. Okay, so I showed you what I found, but that was just from 44,000 documents in the database that I was using. There are 3.5 million pages in the full DOJ release. What I showed you today is just what one person found in 1 week. There's so much more, and there are a lot of open threads. Nobody on YouTube has gone through the documents like this. Tucker said that nobody has gone into the genetics methodically. I just did. And this is just the surface. Part 2 goes even deeper. This whole thing is way older than Jeffrey Epstein. Alright guys, make sure you subscribe if you want to see what I find next. And if you find a document that I should look at, make sure you drop the EFTA number in the comments. This is an ongoing investigation, and we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.